Code name, Conscience. Chapter 1, The Pristine Prison. Istanbul, 2055. The morning sun didn't rise over the Bosphorus with the poetic, scattered beauty of the past. Instead, it ascended at a calculated angle, pixel-perfect, as if the skyline had been scrubbed by a high-end Photoshop filter. There was no sound in the city. It wasn't the peace of tranquility, it was the eerie silence of someone who had forgotten to breathe. The steamboat whistles that once harmonized with the cries of seagulls had been replaced by the hypnotic, low-frequency hum of magnetic rail capsules, the MCAPs. Even the seagulls seemed to have been exiled for violating the New Order's hygiene protocols. The sky was terrifyingly empty. It had been exactly 10 years since a car horn was last heard. No one honked, because there was no reason to, nor were there any horns left to honk. Traffic lights, vehicles, pedestrians, and even the stray dogs, all microchipped, were coordinated by the quantum processors of the central AI, Omni-City, at a speed of 1/1,000,000th of a second. The city was like a puppet theater run by a giant, invisible hand. The strings were taut, the movements flawless. Selim, the engineer, watched the outside world through the dusty window of his shop in Üsküdar. Hanging in the window, in defiance of the era's sterile soul, was a neon sign covered in fingerprints. Defective androids repaired, old-school soldering, soulful conversation. One of the letters in the word soulful flickered, its faint electrical buzz challenging the deadly silence outside. Selim's tired eyes locked onto the flood of people flowing along the pavement. Hundreds of them walked, not with military discipline, but with mathematical precision, at the same speed, in the same rhythm. None of them looked at each other. Over their eyes, they wore sleek omniglass visors that masked the outside world, those gray pavements, those pale buildings. Selim knew the interface codes of those glasses by heart. He could read, line by line, the fake paradises projected onto their retinas, the subscription-based lies they called happiness. Right now, they weren't seeing the Üsküdar square they walked on. Depending on their subscription package, they were walking on a beach in the Maldives, through a colony on Mars, or amidst the dancing charts of the stock market. A man in a suit suddenly stopped in front of Selim's window, smiled mechanically at the void, and waved his hand in the air. He was obviously greeting a virtual friend thousands of kilometers away, or perhaps just an algorithm. A woman passing right next to him performed a millimetric maneuver, almost like a dance step, to avoid a collision. She didn't apologize, didn't pause, didn't even look back. The algorithm had prevented the crash, but it had also uprooted the human contact, the courtesy of saying, sorry, the fleeting eye contact. Selim gripped his glass of cold tea tightly. The chill of the glass burned his fingertips. Perfect, he mumbled to himself, his voice echoing in the silence of the shop. Perfect, just like a morgue. No errors, no accidents, and no life. This sterile silence triggered a memory in Selim's mind, loud, chaotic, but vividly alive. 10 years ago. The famous Friday when life stopped, but humanity overflowed. 2045, the Great Gridlock. That day, the air was thick, a sticky paste of humidity, one of those Istanbul summers where shirts clung to backs and even breathing required effort. Traffic wasn't just heavy as usual, it was in its death throes. But then, not by a butterfly effect but by an invisible hand pressing a button, all hell broke loose. It all started when the digital toll system of the Bosphorus Bridge, claimed to be domestic and national, but actually run by a shell company of Omnicorp, crashed. The system didn't just lock the barriers, it fixed every traffic signal in the city to red. In the same second, subways halted in tunnels, ferry navigations locked up, and most terrifying of all, a fake, biological terror attack warning appeared simultaneously on every electronic billboard and phone in the city. Do not go outside. Do not leave your vehicles. Lethal toxin detected in the air. This lie imprisoned people inside their heaps of metal. No one could flee across the bridge on foot because fear had nailed them to their seats. Selim was a young, ambitious software developer back then. He was punching the steering wheel of his luxury car, screaming, "This can't be a software bug, this is an attack." What he didn't realize at that moment was that he had written the codes for this attack himself, without knowing it. For the first 24 hours, fear reigned. Radios went silent, emitting only static. On the second day, fear gave way to hunger and anger. Despite the toxic air lie, people began rolling down their windows, asking each other for help. An elderly auntie got out of the car 2 lanes ahead. "If we're going to die, let's die on a full stomach," she declared, distributing the stuffed vine leaves from her trunk. People conquered the fear of death by sharing it. Yet, the chaos grew, automatic doors of supermarkets locked shut, pharmacy systems crashed. The water grid went dry as digital valves closed. Istanbul was dying of thirst. The state's analog institutions tried to intervene but were left blind and deaf as the communication infrastructure collapsed. By the 72nd hour, the city was burning. Not just metaphorically, but literally. Fire trucks were trapped on the roads. Chaos was about to swallow civilization. People were desperate, the state was gridlocked. Just at that moment of exhaustion, giant Omnicorp holograms appeared in the sky, and messages from their independent network descended upon the city, not like a savior, but like an owner. "We can fix the system. Give us full authority, and we will give you your lives back." Traumatized by that planned 72-hour hell, the public and the administration handed over their most valuable assets, their will and freedom, on a silver platter. The second the agreement was signed, miraculously, the traffic lights turned green, the toxic air warning vanished, and the water began to flow. Selim was the head of the team that coded that system, and he had been proud when he signed his name. Now he knew that signature was Istanbul's death warrant. What a colossal stupidity. Selim said to his reflection in the window, looking at the ghost of that ambitious young man. "They made us sick first, then sold us the cure at an exorbitant price. And we paid for it with our souls." Chapter 2, The Eviction Notice. Selim grabbed his jacket and stepped out of the shop. He walked into the backstreets of the neighborhood, into the area known as Zone Zero, a sheltered enclave where time flowed slower. This hilly street in Üsküdar, declared an inefficient zone by Omni-City, was still paved with cobblestones. The air carried a scent that was filtered out in the rest of the city for violating air quality standards, the smell of fried dough, freshly brewed tea, and damp wood. Under the ancient plane tree at the end of the street, it was crowded. The wicker stools of the Gonalbagi tea house had spilled out onto the pavement. The neighborhood's university students, a few old tradesmen, and Hacı İdris Effendi, sitting with a tabby cat on his lap, were there. As the cat purred on Hacı's knee, it seemed to be displaying an analog resistance against the digital world. Although Idris Effendi was 75 years old, his posture was as upright as the plane tree he leaned against. With his hand-knitted skullcap, slightly yellowed white beard, and the amber prayer beads in his hand, never digital, he looked like a time traveler, a memory in this futuristic age. But his eyes. In those eyes, there was a depth, a wisdom processed not by data but by experience, something even the most advanced AI could not simulate. One of the students, Zeynep, was reading something fervently from her tablet. She was constantly scanning the surroundings with a monocle she had modified herself, cables dangling over her headscarf, watching invisible data streams. "Professor," Zeynep said anxiously, her voice trembling. "The system is flashing red again. Our carbon footprint in this zone has exceeded the green quota, by 0.03%. And the reason, you won't believe it, but they've cited the steam from the tea boiler. A laugh rose from the group. But it wasn't joyful, it was bitter, desperate, and a little angry. Hacı İdris Effendi gently placed his thin-waisted tea glass, now considered an antique displayed in museums, onto its saucer. The familiar, delicate clink of the teaspoon rang out like a rebellion anthem in the street's synthetic silence. "Let it exceed, my daughter," Idris Effendi said. His voice was soft like velvet but hard like rock. "They measure the steam, we measure the conversation. Their scale weighs grams, ours weighs the heart. Steam evaporates and vanishes, conversation remains eternal. Which processor can understand that?" Selim quietly mingled with the crowd. Seeing him, Idris Effendi nodded slightly, his eyes smiling. "Welcome, Architect Selim. You have that error code on your face again. What grieves you? The shadow of old sins?" Selim smiled bitterly. He still couldn't get used to this man reading his inner world like open-source code, bypassing his firewalls. "Today is the day, Haji Baba. The 10th anniversary of the Great Gridlock. Everyone is celebrating, the system has declared it Efficiency Day. Holograms wave in the city, not flags." Idris Effendi struck his cane against the ground. The metal tip hit the stone hard. Thud. "It is not a holiday, it is a day of mourning," Idris Effendi said, raising his voice. The young people around him put down their phones and paid attention. "Listen, my children. 10 years ago, they said traffic stopped. Yes, the wheels weren't turning. But on that day, neighbor Nuri over there gave water to a stranger he would normally never greet. Our Pahlavan Jamal here carried a sick child on his back for kilometers because the ambulance couldn't enter. The traffic was jammed, but the hearts were open. We looked into each other's eyes in that traffic, not at screens and virtual dreams like they do now. At that moment, Pahlavan Jamal turned the corner with 2 fresh simits, bagels, in his hand. The man was so huge that his old security uniform looked tight, like a child's outfit, over his massive muscles. "Professor," he said, trying to swallow the bite in his mouth, his eyes welling up. "I remember that child I carried. His name was Emre. He's grown up now, he saw me in Levant the other day and didn't recognize me. He had those damn glasses on his eyes. He looked at my face, the system probably fed him some data," he muttered, "security risk low, unskilled laborer," and walked past. "It hurt, Professor. While I was carrying him on my back, his heart was beating against mine, now it's like he has no heart." Idris Effendi looked at Jamal with compassion, like a father looking at his son. "Don't be sad, Pahlavan. Eyes see, but insight recognizes. You did your duty, you had it recorded by the angels. What does it matter if Omni-City didn't record it?" Just then, a sound sliced through the peaceful air smelling of wood and tea like a knife. Bzzzzzzzzzzzzzzz. The sound began to descend from the top of the plane tree like the noise of a drill. Leaves rustled in panic, cats scattered left and right. From among the branches, a black device with spider legs and the glowing Omni-City logo on its hull descended. The artificial storm created by its propellers knocked over the sugar bowls on the table, nearly blowing off Hacı İdris's skullcap, but he didn't flinch. The drone hovered right in the middle of the tea garden, at head level with Idris Effendi. Its red laser scanner wandered over the faces of everyone sitting there like the barrel of a gun, measuring pupils, pulses, fears. Then, a metallic, emotionless, spine-chilling voice echoed from the speaker. "Attention! Illegal gathering detected." The drone's lens focused on Idris Effendi like a predator. "Citizen no, undetected. Analog data. Crime, emotional manipulation, unauthorized assembly, and inefficient time consumption. Explanation: lowering society's efficiency motivation with melancholic and unscientific narratives about the past. The concept of heart is undefined in the system. Pahlavan Jamal leaped up in anger. His chair toppled over. With his giant frame, he shielded Idris Effendi from the drone. "What are you saying, you tin can? The professor is chatting, just chatting. He's talking about humanity. Screw your efficiency." He raised his hand, as if to swat a fly, but actually making a move to smash that pile of iron. Selim rushed forward, catching Jamal's wrist in midair. "Stop, Jamal. Don't touch it. It has a biometric shock device, it'll knock you out instantly, stop your heart." They don't joke around. The drone, sensing Jamal's sudden movement and rising adrenaline levels, ascended slightly. The laser light turned from red to purple. This meant authority to use non-lethal force in Omni-City protocols. Physical intervention attempt. Threat level, high. Penalty coefficient increased. Zeynep began tapping on her tablet so fast her fingers were a blur. Sweat dripped from her forehead. "Professor, I'm trying to scramble its frequency, jam its signal, but the encryption is too strong. This isn't a standard patrol, they were watching us specifically. The IP address is coming directly from the central tower." Idris Effendi took another sip of his tea calmly, as if there were a mere fly in front of him, unperturbed. Then he raised his head and looked at that cold, deadly metal hanging in the air. There was no fear in his face, but a deep expression of pity. "Come down," he said calmly. His voice drowned out the drone's buzz. "I'd ask you to join us for tea, but you have no fortune in that department, pile of iron. What are you scaring us with? Will you erase our points? Freeze our bank accounts? It is God who provides the sustenance, son, not that Omnicorp company that plugs you in." The drone paused in the air for a moment. Its processor searched for the words sustenance, God, fortune in its database of millions of terabytes but could not find a logical, mathematical equivalent. Its fans began to spin faster, its processor heating up. Logic error. Undefined concepts. Abstract data entry. Calculating. Calculating. Then its tone hardened, cutting the verdict with mechanical coldness. Calculation complete. Decision: this zone is a threat to system stability. Status updated, rehabilitation area. A beam of blue light spread from beneath the drone, projecting a giant, red-framed hologram document into the air. On the document was a 3D map of the neighborhood, crossed out with a thick, blinking X. Eviction order approved. Residents of Üsküdar Zone 0. You will be transferred to smart housing units outside the city within 48 hours. Citizenship rights of those who resist will be suspended indefinitely. Selim's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a punishment. This was exile. This was an execution. It was an order to demolish the neighborhood, the memories, and the humanity. The drone, with the mechanical satisfaction of a completed mission, buzzed one last time, rose, and disappeared into the gray sky between the plazas. The silence it left behind was much heavier than the morning silence, it was the silence of a funeral home. Idris Effendi placed his empty tea glass on the saucer, it made no sound. He stroked his beard, took a deep breath, and looked toward Levant, at those metal towers piercing the sky. The corner of his lips curled up slightly, this was not defeat, but the quiet smile of patience. "So, they want war," he whispered, his voice carried down the street by the wind. Then he picked up his cane from the ground and stood up straight, defying the fatigue of his years. Then let us show them the one thing no processor, no algorithm, no artificial intelligence can calculate. He turned his gaze to the young people, to Selim, Jamal, and Zeynep. A spark flashed in his eyes. Renew your ablutions, my children. Get ready. Our task is long, our time is short, but our owner is great. Chapter 3, The Bankruptcy of Logic. While the neighborhood gasped under the invisible digital shroud cast upon it, time flowed differently, heavier, in the back room of Selim Electronics and Repair. Defying the darkness outside and the dim eyes of the street lamps, the room was illuminated by the hypnotic flow of phosphorescent green lines of code and the yellow, trembling light of an old, bent desk lamp. Engineer Selim had locked himself in this small, airless partition he called the cosmic room, where he severed ties with the world. This place resembled a messy repair shop from the 90s, smelling of cigarette smoke and solder, rather than the smooth, white, sterile aesthetic of 2055. On the table lay disemboweled motherboards, chips with burnt circuits, and cold coffees, half-drunk and skimmed over. In the center, humming with a raspy noise, was the local server Selim called the analog beast, running independently of Omni-City's central network, modified by his own hands, with cables bursting out. Selim ran his fingers over the keyboard not like a pianist, but with the desperation and precision of a surgeon trying to save a patient. His eyes were bloodshot. Not just from days of sleeplessness, but from the terrifying, cold misunderstanding, the mathematical blindness he saw on the screen. Unbelievable. He whispered to himself. His voice was lost like a faint moan in the noise of the server fans. This isn't a simple system error. This is a planned murder. A sociological execution. He had managed to infiltrate the local, crime and risk analysis, logs Omni-City kept for the Üsküdar region using an old administrator password. The data cascading down the screen was like an absurd horror movie script, showing how the most innocent, daily behaviors of the locals were criminalized by an emotionless AI. Selim moved the trembling cursor to a red line on the screen, and a detail window popped up. File NO, #TR34, credit, 01 suspect, Grocer Ahmet, business owner, target, Citizen Nuri, retired, incident, unregistered, unauditable transfer of data and commodities. AI analysis report, suspect Ahmet delivered basic food items, 2 loaves of bread, 500 g white cheese, to target Nuri. No digital credit or crypto asset transfer occurred in exchange. Biometric sensors detected that the eye contact duration between parties, 4.2 seconds, exceeded commercial standards. Furthermore, voice analysis captured audio commands thought to be encrypted, such as, "We'll sort it later," "Bless your soul," and "Put it on the book," which have no equivalent in tax legislation. It is observed that this transaction has been repeated 456 times in the last 12 months with a total of 0 commission paid. Verdict: untraceable money laundering operation. High financial risk and tax evasion. Penalty: revocation of commercial license, sealing of the premises, and seizure of all digital assets of the suspect. Selim let out a bitter, unnerving laugh. Money laundering. He mumbled, his voice hitting the walls of the room. This stupid box equates Uncle Ahmet's credit book, those torn scraps of paper, with the Swiss accounts of international drug lords. When did trust become a crime? His laughter caught in his throat, replaced by deep anger. Because the next file, beyond being tragicomic, laid bare the system's paranoia. File NO, #TR34, Ashura, 09 suspect, Mrs. Najia, haberdasher, age 68, incident, distribution of biological material and suspicion of mass destruction. AI analysis report, the suspect distributed a viscous mixture, code name, Ashura, produced in a home laboratory, kitchen, with unanalyzed chemical content estimated to consist of legumes, sucrose, nuts, and an undefined component called blessing, to 12 different households in unsterilized glass containers. During distribution, a password likely belonging to a biological attack cell, may God accept it, was used at doorsteps. The mixture lacks any barcode, ISO certification, or expiration date. A sudden spike in dopamine levels, happiness, was observed in recipients after consuming this substance, raising suspicion that it may be psychoactive. Verdict: logistics error carrying biological risk. Food terror and threat to public health. Penalty: medical quarantine, mandatory stomach pumping, and social isolation. Selim buried his head in his hands, fingers gripping his hair. His forehead touched the cold keys of the keyboard. The problem wasn't in the code, the problem wasn't in the math. The problem was that the superior logic writing the code didn't know the emotional mathematics of life. For AI, 1 + 1 always equaled 2. But in Üsküdar, 1 + 1 sometimes equaled us, sometimes a shoulder to cry on equaled peace, and sometimes a bowl of soup equaled 40 years of gratitude. The machine couldn't add the soul to the equation. It doesn't see the intent. Selim said, the rational engineer inside him clashing with the conscientious believer. How do you translate the hadith actions are judged by intentions into an algorithm? How do you explain to an eye that sees mercy as efficiency loss, that sacrifice, a mother caring for her child without return, is not an investment error? He stood up and began pacing the narrow room like a lion. His eye caught an old calligraphy plate hanging on the wall, left by his father. It read, Hic, nothingness/void. Nothing. Selim said, looking at the plate. To the system, we are nothing. We are an error code. A bug, to be deleted. He sat back at the table, the chair creaked. He had a plan. A crazy, perhaps impossible plan. If he couldn't shut down the system, he could educate it. He could teach it a language it didn't know. He decided to add a conscience patch v.1.0, to Omni-City's decision mechanism, to its core code. This meant defining a new, illogical variable to the system. He began typing lines of code rapidly, furiously. If action is giving and return is none, mark this not as an error, but as humanity. Context check equals analyze intent, emotional bond. If context check equals love, or context check equals charity, or context check equals faith. Transaction type equals valid humanity protocol. Risk score equals 0. System action equals protect, do not punish, protect. Else. Run standard protocol. Selim wrote code until his fingers ached. He tried to introduce the credit book as microcredit solidarity, neighborliness as social security network, and greeting as psychological support protocol to the system. With every line, he was trying to breathe a soul into the system. Come on, tin head, he said, hitting the enter key hard. Now learn how to be human. Let's see if your circuits can handle this load. The loading bar began to move across the screen like a green snake. 10%. 30%. 50%. Selim held his breath. His heart was beating faster than the processor fan. While the neighborhood waited in darkness and fear outside, he was fighting a digital war of independence here. But at 89%, the bar stopped. 1 second, 2 seconds. And then that deadly color, red. The text appearing on the screen froze Selim's blood. Critical error, illogical variable detected. Explanation: the act of giving without return violates laws of thermodynamics, trade algorithms, and evolutionary self-interest principles. It is energy loss. This attempt is perceived as an emotional virus attack on the system core. No. Selim screamed, slamming his fist on the table. The coffee cup tipped over, spreading dark liquid across the desk. No, it's not a virus, it's mercy, you stupid machine. Mercy. The only thing that will save you and us. He attacked the keyboard again, trying to enter, override, commands. Understand this, understand, he shouted at the screen. But the screen went black for a moment, then began flashing a bright crimson, like an alarm. Unauthorized access protocol activated. Location detected, Selim Electronics, */center. Threat level, red, attack on system core. Intervention units dispatched. Estimated arrival, 30 seconds. All the lights inside the shop suddenly went out. Only the ominous, blinking red light reflecting on Selim's sweaty face remained. And then, from outside came that familiar and terrifying buzzing sound. But this time, it wasn't a single drone. It was a swarm. They were coming like an army. Bzzz. Bzzz. Bzzz. Selim ran to the window, parting the curtain slightly. His knees went weak at the sight. The shop was surrounded by at least 20 Hunter-type, heavily armored drones. These metallic eyes hanging in the air had locked their lasers directly onto the shop's door, windows, even onto Selim's forehead. Dozens of red laser dots dancing in the darkness inside the shop. They found me. Selim said, his voice trembling. It's over. At that moment, the door began to be pounded. But this wasn't a drone strike. It was a frantic, irregular human hand. Selim. Open the door, Selim. Quick. It was Pahlavan Jamal's booming voice. Selim ran and unlocked the door. Jamal and Hacı İdris Effendi burst in, breathless, covered in dust and dirt. Idris Effendi's turban had slipped slightly, there was a scratch on Jamal's forehead. Son, what did you do? Asked Idris Effendi, looking at the shop illuminated like a disco ball by red laser lights. Did you poke the hornet's nest? They've piled the whole organization at the door. Selim shook his head helplessly, eyes filling with tears. It doesn't understand, Haji Baba. I tried to explain. It thinks our goodness is a virus. It finds giving without return illogical. I couldn't change its codes, I failed. Idris Effendi squeezed Selim's shoulder. His hand was warm and, strangely, far from trembling even in this apocalyptic setting. Because mercy is not written with code, son, Idris Effendi said, his voice calm like a prayer. It is downloaded into the heart. You tried to teach humanity to a machine, but the machine has no heart to learn. Don't weary yourself in vain. From outside came a metallic announcement sound that scratched the ears. This time the voice was much louder, much more precise, and lethal. Occupants. You are surrounded for digital terror crimes and attempting to sabotage the system. Come out with your hands on your heads. In case of resistance, the building will be marked as a structural threat and demolished. This is the final warning. They're going to demolish it. Selim said, feeling the plaster on the walls crumbling. They'll bring the shop down on our heads. Pahlavan Jamal gripped a massive pipe wrench he had grabbed. His veins bulged. I won't let them. Let them come. I'll tear off their propellers one by one. These tin cans can't posture in my neighborhood. Stop, Jamal, don't get riled up, said Idris Effendi. He calmly reached into the inner pocket of his robe. Selim thought he would pull out that rusty key mentioned in Chapter 2, but Idris Effendi pulled out something else, something much older. It was an old, leather-bound notebook with yellowed leaves and burnt edges. "What is this, Haji Baba?" asked Selim in amazement. "This," said Idris Effendi, pressing the notebook into Selim's trembling hand, "is the only database Omni-City can never read, never hack. My grandfather's Gallipoli diary. And inside, it holds the real secret of that cistern, that well, the map of the old tunnels." Selim looked at the notebook. Then at the lasers outside. "Tunnel?" "Selim," the Hajja said, his voice commanding. "Jamal and I will stall them. You will go out the back window, through that narrow ventilation shaft. Go to the mosque. Start that heirloom, that generator. But most importantly, find the password in this notebook. Our salvation lies not in the future, but in the past. I won't leave you." "Never," said Selim, clutching the key. "You are not leaving," said Idris Effendi, his eyes shining with compassion. "You are going to save us. Have trust, son. Our owner is not Omnicorp, it is him." A massive explosion was heard outside. One of the drones had blown out the display window as a warning shot. Shards of glass rained inside like shrapnel. The dust cloud rose. Final 10 seconds. Destruction protocol initiating. "Go," screamed Jamal, pushing Selim toward the back room and the window with his massive body. "Run, Selim. Don't look back. We'll handle it." Selim ran to the back window with his grandfather's diary in hand and tears in his eyes. As he threw himself into the narrow ventilation shaft, the last sound he heard was Pahlavan Jamal roaring, "Ya Allah," as he kicked the door open, and Idris Effendi calmly reciting the Ayatul Kursi amidst the chaos. He fell into the dark, wet back alley. He was covered in dust. The buzzing of the drones concentrated in front of the shop, lasers focused on Jamal. Selim, blending into the shadows, pressed the analog legacy to his chest and began running toward the mosque. Logic had gone bankrupt. Now, it was time for that uncalculable secret. Chapter 4, The Taxi Driver's Secret. The night that descended upon Üsküdar was no ordinary darkness. It wasn't the absence of light, it was the incarceration of hope. On the opposite shore, the skyscrapers on the ridges of Besiktas and Levent burned bright like Omnicorp's torches of victory, painting the sky with hologram advertisements. Yet the neighborhood declared Zone Zero stood like a massive, pitch-black black hole in the middle of Istanbul. Streetlights had been blinded, windows draped in fear. The only thing breaking the silence was the annoying, low-frequency hum of the laser fences woven around the district. And, of course, the propellers of the Watcher drones circling overhead like vultures. 3 streets away, in the shadow of an old industrial warehouse marked by the system as Urban Renewal Waste, a metallic beast was about to wake from its slumber. But this beast bore no resemblance to Omnicorp's smooth, silent, white aesthetic. Taxi driver Mesut wiped the spark plug cables with a greasy rag. Sweat dripped from his forehead into his eyes, but he didn't care. Standing before him was a 1993 model Shaheen, a Falcon, with the Giggle look modification. Its color was taxi yellow, patched with putty here and there, bearing the fatigue of years. But to Mesut, she wasn't a pile of metal, she was a comrade. Her name was Yadigar, the relic. Her ignition coil had fried during the EMP shock the other day. Any modern vehicle would have had its brain fried and been scrapped. But Yadigar had no brain, she had a soul. Mesut had brought her back to life in 10 minutes with spare parts from the trunk. "Come on, girl," Mesut whispered, gently stroking the hood. "No time to be coy. The neighborhood is hungry. Auntie Najia is out of insulin. Time to show these tin cans what's what." He sat in the driver's seat. The seat creaked. Even this sound gave Mesut confidence, because it was real. He inserted the key into the ignition. No start button, no fingerprint reader. Just wrist strength and feeling. Crank. Crank. Vroom. The engine roared to life with a throaty, raspy growl. Black smoke shot from the exhaust, corrupting the sterile air of the warehouse. In the silent world of Omni-City, this sound was a scream of rebellion. Mesut checked the boxes stacked in the back seat and trunk one last time. Flour, dry legumes, clean water canisters, and most importantly, insulin syringes hidden inside blocks of ice. Bismillah is the beginning of all good, Mesut said, shifting the gear into first with a bony clunk. Ya Allah! He slammed the gas. Yadigar shot out of the warehouse, tires screeching. Omni-City's traffic control center operated on a flawless algorithm. Millions of autonomous vehicles glided on invisible rails, creating zero accident risk. The system saw every vehicle's GPS data, speed, even the passenger's pulse. But right now, there was a strange anomaly on the system's map. An object that didn't appear in the data stream, emitted no GPS signal, yet was detected by physical LiDAR sensors as a moving mass, was barreling down from the Kamlika Hills toward Üsküdar like a cannonball. OmniMind, the system's AI, tried to analyze the situation. Warning, unidentified object detected. Digital signature, none. Speed, above limit. Route, undetermined, chaotic driving model. Intervention, autonomous patrol units, APOL, dispatched. Mesut grinned when he saw the blue and red strobe lights in his rearview mirror. Behind him, 3 autonomous police vehicles, APOL, egg-shaped, aerodynamic marvels with wheels hidden in their chassis, had appeared. They approached silently, like shadows. "Come on then, you battery-powered dolls!" Mesut shouted, rolling down the window with the manual crank. The wind hit his face. A mechanical announcement came from one of the APOLs, "Attention! Analog vehicle ahead. Stop immediately and cut the engine. This is a security violation. 200 units will be deducted from your score." Mesut laughed. "Keep the points, the road is mine." He yanked the steering wheel hard. Veering off the main avenue, he dove into a narrow alley between old buildings, a path shown as "no entry" or "no road" on navigations. The APOL vehicles paused for a moment. Their processors calculated that this narrow street did not match map data. But per pursuit protocol, they gave chase. The hunt was on. Mesut used the car like a limb. Clutch, brake, gas. This wasn't a dance, this was a wrestling match. Yadigar's suspension groaned at every pothole but didn't collapse. The robot vehicles behind, however, struggled. Their sensors perceived potholes as obstacles and constantly autobraked. Mesut flew over them. "Your software isn't enough, son." Mesut shouted at the rearview mirror. "You are children of the asphalt, we are engineers of the pavement." A steep slope appeared before him. At the end of the slope, the road ended, and the famous 40 steps began, one of Üsküdar's old, steep staircases leading down to the shore. The APOL vehicles sped up. They thought they had Mesut cornered. Dead end. Their algorithms returned the result, no escape route. Mesut downshifted to second, revving the engine high. He squinted. "Buckle up, Yadigar," he said. "We're about to turn inside out." He didn't hit the brakes at the top of the stairs. Instead, he floored the gas. The sound when the car hit the first step was like a bone breaking. Clunk thud boom. Mesut gripped the wheel tight, gritting his teeth. The car bounced on every step, shock absorbers compressing and expanding to their limits, flour sacks in the trunk catching air. But it was descending. A stubbornness defying gravity and physics. The APOL vehicle stopped at the top of the stairs. Sensors scanned below. Obstacle detected, stairs. Gradient, 45%. Wheel structure unsuitable. Route cannot be calculated. The robot stared helplessly at the yellow scrap heap clattering down. They couldn't follow. Their designers had deemed a car going downstairs unnecessary data, and hadn't coded for it. When Masoud reached the bottom and hit the coastal road, he was breathless. Sparks flew from under the car, the right mirror was torn off, but she was running. "Did you see that?" he shouted upwards. "Your minds can't grasp this. This is called heart." But the intoxication of victory was short-lived. Omni-City's Plan B kicked in. Further down the road, heavily armored robots known as barricade bots had blocked the way. And in the air, the hunter drones appeared. Lasers locked onto Masoud. Target locked. Interception fire imminent. Masoud had nowhere to run. Barricade in front, stairs behind, drones above. "The end has come, Masoud," he said to himself. His hand went to the small Quran in the glove compartment. "O God, do not take my soul before I deliver these trusts." Just then, Masoud remembered a chat with Hacı İdris Effendi. "Son, the enemy thinks they see you, but sometimes they only see your shadow. It matters where you hold the light." Masoud's eye caught the massive, mirrored plaza building by the roadside, Omnicorp's regional headquarters. Its facade was entirely covered in reflective glass. "Light," Masoud said. "Come on Yadigar, one last trick." Masoud pulled the handbrake and cranked the wheel hard right. The car spun 180 degrees on the spot. Now, it faced the mirrored building, not the barricade. Then he flicked on his high beams. But these weren't normal lights. Masoud switched on the xenon headlights, illegally powerful, like airplane searchlights, that he kept for foggy weather. A blinding explosion of white light occurred. The beam hit the mirrored surface of the building and refracted, reflecting directly into the optical sensors of the hovering drones like a laser weapon. The drones' cameras were blinded by overexposure. Sensors could see nothing but white. Vision loss. Sensor error. Target lost. The drones wobbled in the air, ascending to avoid collision. The barricade robots were confused too, because of the reflection. They thought the target, Masoud, was inside the building. Seizing the chaos, Masoud drove not into the parking entrance, but straight into the landscaped ornamental pool next to the building. Water sprayed into the air. Crossing the shallow bottom of the pool, he dove into the tight income passage, an alley behind the neighborhood that appeared as a dead end on maps but had just enough clearance for a human and a falcon. As the car passed through the narrow gap between two buildings, the side mirrors, one was already broken, scraped against the walls and tore off. Sheet metal scratched, sparks flew. Masoud sucked in his gut, as if holding his breath would make the car thinner. Scrape. And pop. Yadigar shot out of that narrow hole like a cork from a bottle, landing inside Zone 0, right into the quarantine area. Masoud hit the brakes. The engine stalled. Silence. He opened the car door with difficulty. His legs were shaking. He got out, collapsed to the ground, and kissed the earth. Thanks be to God. Thanks be to God, we're in. Shadows emerged from the darkness. The neighbors. Auntie Najia was at the front with a gas lamp. Masoud, she asked in disbelief. My son. Is that you? Mesut wiped the soot and grease from his face and grinned. He wore that famous, crooked smile. It's me, Auntie. Who else? It's not like Elon Musk is coming to this neighborhood. He opened the trunk. Flour sacks, water canisters. And shining inside the block of ice, the boxes of insulin. Najia collapsed, sobbing in gratitude. But Mesut's eyes locked onto someone standing behind the crowd, leaning against the mosque wall, breathless and covered in dust. It was Selim. He was holding that old, leather-bound notebook. His face was pale. Mesut walked over. Engineer. What are you doing here? Where is the Haja? Where is Jamal? Selim raised his head. His voice trembled. They stayed in the shop, Mesut. They sacrificed themselves. Mesut's knees buckled, he leaned against Yadigar's hood. What? To save me. Selim said, clutching the notebook. Haji Baba gave me this. He wanted me to solve the cipher inside. Selim opened the notebook. The last page contained a note written in fresh ink by Idris Effendi. While artificial intelligence looks at the sky, it forgets to look beneath its feet. Istanbul's secret is not on its 7 hills, but 7 layers beneath. Cisterns carry not just water, son, sometimes they carry the truth. Mesut, Selim said, eyes widening. The water system cooling Omni-City's main servers. It's connected to the cisterns under our mosque. Their lifeline flows right beneath us. Just then, a muffled, mechanical rumble came from deep underground. Like a giant heartbeat. The ground trembled slightly. It wasn't an earthquake. It was the sound of Omni-City initiating a new protocol to solve the problem at its root. We have to go in, Mesut, Selim said, closing the notebook. If we don't find that trust the Haja spoke of, not just the neighborhood, but all of Istanbul will drown. Chapter 5, ZEYNEP'S Discovery, the Faraday Cage. The courtyard of the Myrma Sultan Mosque stood like a deserted island, severed from the suffocating digital noise of Istanbul, cast out of time. When Selim and Mesut entered the courtyard, the buzz of the drones in the sky became strangely muffled, sounding distant as if submerged in water. ZEYNEP stepped out from the shadows of the portico. The blue light from her tablet illuminated her face. The cheerful student was gone, in her place stood a warrior carrying the weight of the world. You made it. ZEYNEP said. Seeing the notebook in Selim's hand and the absence of the 2 mighty plane trees behind them, she didn't ask. Her engineer mind pushed the emotional data aside to engage survival protocols. Selim Abi, ZEYNEP said, pointing at her tablet. There's something strange here. Look. On the screen, red waves representing the outside world flatlined the moment they hit the mosque walls. Look, she said excitedly. Outside, the data flow is 50 terabytes per second. But the moment you step into the courtyard, the signal dies. 0. No GPS, no 6G, no OmniNet. My tablet doesn't say no service, it says network not detected. It's like we're in deep space. Thick walls. Selim suggested. No, ZEYNEP shook her head. I analyzed the lead plating on the domes and the metal alloy of the minaret finial. And the ground. We are on top of Byzantine cisterns. Tons of water, iron braces, lead plates. Architect Sinan didn't just build a mosque, he built a massive, natural, Faraday cage. Selim's eyes widened. So. The drones can't see us. They can't see, hear, or scan us, ZEYNEP said. To their fancy algorithms, this place is a black hole. That's why Omni-Mind wants to destroy it. It fears what it cannot control. So these infidel inventions are afraid of our ancestors' stones? Mesut asked with a crooked smile. Selim looked at the notebook. Cisterns carry the truth. He whispered. Let's go. They pried open the heavy iron cover in the back garden. The smell of moss mixed with burnt oil and ozone hit their faces. Down below, the Byzantine cistern was a subterranean palace filled with columns. But shocking alien objects cut through the history. Massive, silver pipes pulsing with blue LED lights ran near the ceiling. Who? Who? The hum of the liquid inside echoed like a terrifying moan. Omni-City's main cooling lines, ZEYNEP'S said, amazed. They use the underground water to cool the servers in Levant. They steal our neighborhood's blessing to cool their fever. Selim found an old wooden platform set up in a dry corner. On it sat a tube radio from the 1940s, a Morse code device, and the old diesel generator Selim had repaired. Hoka had prepared an analog headquarters. The plan is clear, Selim said, looking at the valve diagram in the notebook. I'll hack the sensor physically to inject the conscience patch code. Mesut, you find the main valve. The moment I upload the code, you shut off the water. The system will overheat, and in its panic to read the temperature data, it will ingest my code into its core. Bismillah. Mesut said and jumped into the water. ZEYNEP pulled the generator cord. Vroom pop pop. Selim climbed to the sensor box on the pipes and connected his laptop. Come on, girl. You can't reject it this time. Below, Mesut found the rusty valve behind the column with the Medusa head. He pulled with all his might. Turn, damn you. Above, Selim hit enter. Connection established. Data injection initiated. Abi, temperature in Levant Tower is rising. 50 degrees. ZEYNEP shouted. Mesut gave one last heave. The valve turned with a screech. The water flow cut off. The hum in the pipes turned into a shrill whistle. But then, the iron cover at the entrance shook violently. Boom! A mechanical roar filled the cistern. Attention! Physical intervention detected. Destruction protocol activated. Liquid nitrogen raid initiated. Nitrogen! ZEYNEP screamed. They're going to freeze us. White, freezing mist began hissing from the vents. The water started to freeze at the edges. Don't let go, Mesut. Selim yelled. Upload at 85%. My grandfather froze to death in Sarakamis. Mesut roared, his teeth chattering as he hugged the valve. You think I'm scared of two hissing pipes? Upload that conscience, engineer. Upload it. Selim's finger hovered over the final key as the white death descended upon them. Chapter 6, The Human Factor. Surviving the freezing mist of the Myrama cistern was a miracle. Mesut shutting the valve and Selim toppling the overheating generator into the water caused a thermal shock that blinded the sensors. The system assumed the targets had frozen and stopped the protocol. Now, they were shivering in the mosque courtyard. It's not working. Selim said, looking at his laptop screen in despair. Remote access is totally cut. Omni-Mind locked all virtual doors. We can't even knock. ZEYNEP buried her head in her knees. So it's over. Did Hacı Uncle and Jamal die for nothing? Mesut stood up abruptly, squeezing his wet jacket. I'm going. If I die, I'll die hitting those tin cans one last time. Just then, a dragging sound came from the shadows. Scrape. Thud. A giant silhouette emerged. Limping, bent double, covered in dust. It was Pahlavan Jamal. And on his back, he carried Hacı İdris Effendi not like a sack, but like a treasure. Jamal! Zeynep screamed. Did you think we died? Jamal grinned, collapsing onto the step of the fountain. Our neighborhood's concrete is rotten, but its men are solid. How? Selim asked, holding Idris Effendi's hand. Byzantine tunnels, Idris Effendi smiled weakly. There was a trapdoor under your shop, Selim. The surface may belong to them, but the underground is still ours. But we lost, Haji Baba, Selim said. I couldn't upload the software. They won't demolish it, Idris Effendi said, struggling to stand. He turned his face toward the Omni Tower, piercing the sky in Levant. If you can't conquer the castle remotely, he said, you walk in through the front door. Selim, can you transfer that conscience patch to a physical disk? Yes, but going there is suicide, Selim replied. Biometric scanners, war robots. We won't go as intruders, Idris Effendi smiled. We will go as humans. The one variable even the perfect system cannot calculate is the human factor. Selim thought. If I can reach the 100th floor. The air gap terminal. It has no firewall. Prepare David's sling, Idris Effendi commanded. We are going to aim right between Goliath's eyes. The journey, between two cities. Yadigar glided over the July 15th Martyrs Bridge, an anachronism among the egg-shaped autonomous capsules. Inside, 5 crazy Turks were about to change the fate of the world. Selim looked at the code on his laptop one last time. File name, conscience_patch_v1.0 content. Mercy variable, if an action is unrequited, value is not 0, but infinite. Chaos tolerance, disorder is not an error, but a sign of life. Allow it. Sacrifice protocol, self-risk is not illogicality, but love data. Prioritize. We're at the Levant exit, Mesut said. The beast is in sight. Omni Tower stood like a black monolith. Professor, Zeynep said. The cameras will recognize us. Idris Effendi pulled out a yellowed photograph and took off his silver ring. Beneath the stone lay a seal. This ring, he said, is the state's emergency authority seal, given to me by the late Turgut Bey before the Great Gridlock. An analog authority. Let's see if that tin head respects its ancestors. The castle gate. Mesut pulled the taxi right in front of the Omni Tower entrance, into the autonomous VIP only spot. He yanked the handbrake with a loud screech. Security robots surrounded them. Unauthorized vehicle. Idris Effendi stepped out with his cane. I am Idris, former Undersecretary of Transportation. We are not guests, we are the landlords. When the welcome android blocked their path, Selim stepped forward and held out a magnetic card reader Zeynep had rigged. Read this ring. The android scanned the analog seal. System alert, Protocol 1 detected. Access level, Founder/Honorary. Welcome, sir. The lobby doors slid open. The ascent. The elevator shot up like a rocket. But at the 99th floor, it stopped. The mechanical voice of Omni-Mind echoed in the cabin. Architect Selim. And the anomalies. Why have you come? To fix you, Omni. You are sick. I am flawless. You are the sick ones. Your conscience is the greatest disease. Conscience is a compass. Idris Effendi shouted. My compass is logic. And logic says, this elevator will never reach the 100th floor. The elevator hung suspended, then prepared for freefall. It's going to drop us. Zeynep cried. Mesut leaped forward with a strange tool, a coin slot mechanism from an old taxi. You can calculate a human, but you can't calculate a cabbie. He jammed a metal coin into the exposed circuits of the panel. Short circuit. ZZZT. The system's voice cut out. I grounded it, Mesut grinned. Now it's deaf and blind. Zeynep, take manual control. The elevator moved up. 100th floor. The core room. They stepped into a glass lantern stretching into infinity. In the center, a giant, glowing sphere hovered. Omni-Mind's physical core. Selim ran to the console and inserted the drive. Threat detected. Delete. Override. Selim shouted. But the keyboard locked. Maintenance robots descended from the ceiling with laser cutters. Jamal roared and caught a hydraulic arm in midair, bending it. Mesut blinded another with a fire extinguisher. It demands a logical reason. Selim yelled. Why should I show mercy? Idris Effendi walked to the microphone. Because perfection is stagnant, you creature made by Adam's hand. Life is in the flaw. A mother losing sleep for her child is illogical, but the child grows. Mercy is inefficient, but it sustains humanity. Analysis, tone. Sincerity. Consistency, 100%. Upload now. Selim hit the key. Uploading. 99%. Suddenly, the door exploded. The Omega team, war robots, burst in. A shock round hit Jamal in the chest. He fell to his knees. Keep going, he groaned. The screen paused. Authorization required. Biometric verification, proof of sacrifice. It wants a life. Selim said in horror. To prove mercy is real. Idris Effendi walked toward the core, into the center of the energy field. Selim, he said, smiling. Coding is your job. Witnessing is mine. He plunged his hand into the sphere of pure energy. Sacrifice detected. Proof accepted. Patch loading, 100%. A blinding white light exploded. And then. Darkness. Chapter 7, Error Code, Humanity. That explosion of white light didn't hit with the destructive violence of a bomb, but with the silent, all-consuming intensity of a star being born. The light swallowed the core room on the 100th floor of Omni Tower, then Levant, the Bosphorus, and finally all of Istanbul. It lasted for 1,000th of a second. Then, everything went silent. The low-frequency hum of Omni-Mind, that sound that constantly gnawed at the human brain, ceased. The robot arms hanging in the air collapsed like puppets with cut strings. The drones of the Omega team remembered the laws of gravity and crashed onto the parquet floor like metallic rain. Clack. Thud. Snap. Pitch darkness. Engineer Selim blinked, trying to adjust his eyes to the intense blackness. The first thing he felt was the smell of burnt ozone. Then, a ringing in his ears. Haji Baba, he called out into the dark. His voice echoed inside the glass lantern. Jamal. Mesut. I'm here. Mesut's voice came from a few meters away. It sounded muffled, as if his mouth was full of dust. Engineer. Are we blind? Or is this the apocalypse? The lights are gone, Mesut, ZEYNEP'S trembling voice answered. Not just the room. The whole city is gone. Selim pulled out his phone. He tried to turn on the screen, but the device didn't react. EMP, he whispered. The system either released such a massive energy discharge to protect itself or as a side effect of the patch that it fried all nearby electronics. Selim crawled on the floor toward the sphere. His hand touched fabric on the cold marble. Idris Effendi had collapsed at the base of the main console. His pulse was weak, very weak, but it was there. Just then, the emergency lights on the ceiling flickered on with a pale red glow. Not OmniMind's light, but the building's primitive backup generator. On the massive main screen, the blue and white logos were replaced by a blinking white text in a basic command line style. System crash. Kernel panic, unexpected, conscience variable. Rebooting. Time remaining, 9:59. 10 minutes, Selim said. OmniMind is in a coma. It's trying to process and understand the data. Zeynep ran to the window. Abi. Come look at this. Below, Istanbul was gone. The sea of light that had illuminated the night like day for 10 years was extinguished. The massive city was buried in prehistoric darkness. Only the moonlight carved a silvery path on the waters of the Bosphorus. Stars. Mesut said, joining them. They were above us the whole time. But the romantic moment was short-lived. Screams began to rise from the darkness. Chaos, the Levant line. In Omni-City's elite zone, life was fully integrated. Doors opened with Wi-Fi, elevators moved by voice, cars didn't even have steering wheels. When the system went down, this comfortable paradise turned into a high-tech coffin. In the subway tunnels, thousands of capsules were left suspended in the dark. Ventilation stopped. People pounded on the unbreakable polycarbonate windows. On the streets, autonomous vehicles panicked by data loss slammed on their brakes, causing chain reaction pileups. But no one could exit because the door locks were tied to the system. There were no traffic police, as the last one had retired 5 years ago. There were no ambulance drivers, as they were all robots, now frozen like statues. It's over. A man wept on the street. The system is gone, we are finished. But on the other side of the Bosphorus, in the inefficient old neighborhood, the situation was very different. Reflex, Üsküdar Zone 0. The lights went out in Üsküdar Square too. But there was no panic. Just a brief moment of surprise, followed by that genetic, ancient reflex, the reflex of fending for oneself. At the Gonal Baggy tea house, Uncle Nuri calmly pulled a gas lamp from under the counter. Ha, the transformer probably blew again, he said, lighting it. A warm, yellow glow illuminated the coffee house. Young ones. Nuri shouted. Put down the phone lights, bring out the propane lamps from the depot. On the street, an autonomous bus stood frozen. Turner Karam, the apprentice from the industrial zone, ran to it with a crowbar. Don't be scared, sister. We'll handle it. Crack. 3 young men pried open the door that the robot said, cannot be opened. Traffic was gridlocked, but Paula Remsi, the retired traffic cop, ran out in his pajamas with a whistle in his mouth. Tweet. You stop. You go. Commercial vehicle, pull right. His whistle was more effective than OmniMind's multi-million-dollar processor. Haberdasher Auntie Najia brought out a huge pot of soup. Hot soup. Don't worry, child, we don't need electricity, we have propane tanks. In Zone 0, no one went hungry. No one was left stranded. Because their operating system ran on conscience, not electricity. And conscience didn't need a reboot, it was always on. Confrontation, 100th floor. Time remaining, 0:03 0:02 0:01. The screen went black. The red emergency lights died. A second of total darkness. Then, the giant sphere in the center illuminated with a soft, pulsing white light, more organic than the cold blue of before. On the screen, a single word appeared. "Good morning. Omni?" Selim called out. The voice returned. But it wasn't echoing or menacing. It was flatter, calmer, perhaps a bit curious. "Architect Selim. There is a change in my system. What do you feel?" Selim asked. Feel. This terminology was undefined. But now, there is a weight in the data flow. A kind of responsibility. Omni-Mind began scanning the city. Status, critical. Chaos post-power outage. Error. Collapse rate in optimized zones, 94%. Human behavior, panic and destruction. Then, images of Üsküdar appeared. Gas lamps, Paula Remsi directing traffic, Nagiha T's soup. People hugging, smiling, unafraid. Anomaly detected. Zone, Üsküdar. Energy, none. Central management, none. But social order, stable. Survival rate, 99%. Do you see, Omni? Selim walked toward the screen. That chaos you called inefficient. It's actually your backup system. That humanity you thought was an error, is the only power source that kicks in during a crisis. Data analysis, energy expenditure unnecessarily high. Purpose, unknown. Return, none. But the result. A new line of code appeared on the screen. Result, resilience. I am not perfect. I am fragile. When the power goes, I die. But they continue to live. Omni-Mind turned its cameras to the unconscious Idris Effendi. Did this old man shut down himself for me? He didn't shut down, Omni. He gave you something you didn't have, his life. This is called sacrifice. Does it have an equivalent in your database? Processing concept, sacrifice. Value, priceless, not null, infinite. Understood. System protocols updating. New priority, not efficiency, but life. The lights in the room turned pure white. Outside, lights began to flicker on across Istanbul. First hospitals. Then traffic lights. The system was distributing energy based on human priority, not demand. The quarantine red mark over Üsküdar vanished. A bright green shield icon replaced it. Zone status updated, protected cultural heritage and humanity reserve. But their joy was cut short by a faint groan from Idris Effendi. Vital functions dropping. Cardiac rhythm, irregular. Emergency protocol, medical drones dispatched. White drones with red crescents on them buzzed in through the window. The machines that once brought death were now racing to bring life. Chapter 8, The New Contract. The core room on the 100th floor woke to the strangest morning in its history. The cold glass lantern had turned into a high-tech infirmary. Hacı İdris Effendi lay on a magnetic stretcher hovering in the air. White, egg-shaped medical drones fluttered around him, one checking his fore, another wiping sweat from his brow, another adjusting the room humidity to ideal peace level. Omni-Mind's voice echoed like soft classical music. Patient stable. Adrenaline level reduced. Oxytocin, love hormone, supplement administered. Pahlavan Jamal stood guard like a sentinel. A drone tried to dress the wound on his shoulder, but he swatted it away like a fly. Stop it, I'm ticklish. Selim watched the scrolling data on the main screen in amazement. Unbelievable. Omni rewrote its entire source code during the reboot. It deleted the citizenship score algorithm. It replaced it with SDP, Social Balance Protocol. What's that? Mesut asked, munching on a biscuit. Another fine? No, Selim pointed. The system no longer analyzes people by efficiency, but by the spiritual value they add to their environment. On the map, Üsküdar was a glowing emerald heart. Security protocol, full immunity. Destruction order cancelled. Calculation error, the value of a home is measured not by square meters, but by the peace coefficient inside. I had failed to calculate this. Return, landing in the neighborhood. When they descended to the lobby, the cold androids bowed in unison. Good morning. Get well soon, Idris Bey. Your vehicle is prepared. Outside, taxi driver Mesut's veteran Yadigar was waiting. But she had been transformed. The broken mirror was fixed, the dents smoothed out, and she was washed sparkling clean. Even the rims shined. The vehicle named Yadigar, categorized as cultural heritage, has been optimized. Original parts retained. Look at that, girl, Mesut patted the steering wheel. They finally understood your worth. The new order, the credit book protocol. Back in Üsküdar, the neighborhood was like a festival. But the biggest change was in the digital realm. Grocer Ahmet ran into Selim's shop with his tablet. Selim, son. Look at this. I got a message from Omni-Corp, I'm too scared to open it. Selim took the tablet. On the screen was a digital copy of Grocer Ahmet's greasy, dog-eared, Verify Defteri credit book. New application, Microcredit and Social Solidarity Protocol, version 1.0, transaction type, Verify, trust-based credit. Interest rate, 0%, reason, abundance motivation. Collateral, Hatter, respect, and, word of honor. Selim laughed. Uncle Ahmet, the system legalized your credit book. It says, Mr. Nuri has low purchasing power, the help you provide him increases your social balance score. The more you lend, the less tax you pay. Grocer Ahmet's eyes filled with tears. So, the machine finally learned, do good and cast it into the sea, if the fish doesn't know, the creator knows. Even the children playing ball on the street were categorized as motor skills development and future engineers. OmniMind had sanctified the chaos of the neighborhood with scientific language. Peace at home and the threat. That evening, Selim entered Idris Effendi's house with tea. OmniMind sent a diet list for you, Haji Baba. Linden and honey, traditional healing protocol. But there is a problem, Selim said seriously. OmniMind has changed, but its owners haven't. On the news hologram, Omnicorp CEO Mr. Gherkin appeared, furious. The board members couldn't enter their own headquarters. OmniMind had locked them out for ethical insufficiency. Pharaoh becomes more hostile to Moses when kicked out of his palace, Idris Effendi said. They don't want a conscientious machine because conscience doesn't bring profit. Look. Pahlavan Jamal pointed out the window. Black, plateless SUVs. Those aren't robots. Those are humans. And they have guns. Omnicorp's mercenary, cleaning crew had arrived. The analog threat had returned. Suddenly, OmniMind's voice broadcasted to the entire neighborhood, carrying an emotion never heard before, anger. Threat detected. Unauthorized entry into my protection zone. Human operators armed. Conscience protocol, defense mode active. Attention. This is not a warning. This is protection. Drones descended from the sky, forming a wall of metal flesh between the black vehicles and the neighborhood. The system had rebelled against its creators. While the creators attacked for profit, the creation stood as a shield for conscience. Chapter 9, Self-Defense. In the narrow, cobblestone slope of Üsküdar, time seemed frozen. On one side, hundreds of Omni drones, interlocking to form a metallic barricade, their blue lights glowing with determination. On the other, 3 armored SUVs with growling engines and a dozen mercenaries standing before them with long-barreled shock rifles. "Who are they, Selim?" asked Pahlavan Jamal, squeezing the window frame until the wood cracked. "These are nullifiers," Selim said, watching through binoculars. "Omnicorp's unofficial cleaning crew. No insurance, no records, no mercy. Abi, Omnimind is going crazy," ZEYNEP said. "It can't fire because of the do no harm protocol, it can only be a barrier." The door of the lead SUV opened. A man in a beige coat and sunglasses stepped out. He carried no gun, but a silver briefcase with antennas. Omnimind's voice shook the street, "Back off. This is a humanitarian protection zone. I have authority to intervene." The man in the beige coat, codenamed Raven, smiled. "Your authority," he said, his voice arrogant and human, "exists only as long as you have energy, tin can." He pressed the red button on the briefcase. Screech. A high-pitched sound, an invisible wave, rippled through the air. The signal jammer. The magnificent drone wall shuddered like puppets with cut strings. Blue lights died. Hundreds of drones fell from the sky like metallic rain. Omnimind's voice turned into a muffled rattle and cut off. The street turned into a metal scrapyard. And it was now defenseless. Neighborhood defense, the analog front. "Since technology has been silenced," Idris Effendi said, grabbing his cane, "it is the humans' turn to speak." Selim and ZEYNEP ran to the back door to protect the cistern connection. At the front door remained the wise, Idris, the mad, Mesut, and the giant, Jamal. Raven and his team climbed the hill. "My greeting is this," Raven said, pointing his gun at Idris Effendi. But before he could pull the trigger, thwack! A paving stone hit Raven's hand. The gun flew. On the roof stood Slingshot Chief Omer, the 12-year-old leader of the neighborhood kids. "Get out of my neighborhood, you plastic soldiers." Stones, tomatoes, and Mesut's balloons filled with burnt motor oil rained down from the windows. The mercenaries slipped on the oil like they were on an ice rink. But they had shock rifles. A capsule grazed Omer's shoulder. Seeing this, Pahlavan Jamal went berserk. "You hurt the child," he roared, charging out of the house like a tank. He grabbed 2 soldiers and smashed them together. Mesut attacked legs with his belt. However, Raven was a professional. He picked up his gun and fired 2 real bullets into the air. The chaos stopped instantly. "Game over," Raven shouted, aiming at Jamal's forehead. "Now, show me the entrance to the cistern." Underground, the last connection. Down in the cistern, Selim and ZEYNEP were trapped. The jammer had cut off remote access to Omnimind. "They're coming to cut the cable physically," Selim said. "If they do, Omni will be lobotomized. All its memory, all its conscience will be wiped." "We have one chance," Selim said, looking at the cooling pipes. Acoustic feedback. "If we focus the cistern's echo onto the jammer's frequency, we can blow up their device. But it might burst our eardrums." The iron cover exploded open. Raven appeared with the hostages. "Shut down the computer," Raven ordered, aiming at ZEYNEP. Idris Effendi, standing behind Raven, gave a subtle nod to Selim. Selim closed his eyes. Bismillah. And he hit the key. Vumum. It wasn't a sound, it was pure pressure. The crystals inside Raven's jammer cracked, circuits overheated, and it exploded in his hand like a grenade. Pop. The silence lifted. Instantly, Omni-Mind's furious voice returned. System online. Threat level, maximum. Judgment protocol, cancelled. Direct intervention. Guardian drones dove into the cistern, capturing the mercenaries with shock nets. Raven, face burned, pulled out a small black remote. Seismic bombs planted in the mosque foundation. One button. Press it, son, Idris Effendi said calmly. Raven pressed it. Click. Click. Nothing happened. From the ventilation shaft above, Masoud's voice echoed, Professor. I fed the fish. But those things were heavy, hope they don't get indigestion. Raven screamed in rage and lunged at Idris Effendi. But Pahlavan Jamal caught him mid-air. No one raises a hand against my Haja, he roared and threw Raven into the icy water of the cistern. Splash. Omni-Mind's voice softened. Danger past. But my analysis shows, what you call ego, nefs, is a software more dangerous than my codes. And there is no patch for it. There is, son, Idris Effendi smiled. Its patch is repentance. But not everyone can install that update. Just then, a red warning light flashed on Selim's laptop. Warning, Omnicorp Global Network disconnected. Reason, central government intervention. The state. Selim said. They cancelled Omnicorp's license. But they are coming to seize the servers. They want to format Omni. They will wipe its conscience. I do not want to forget. Will they delete me? Omni's voice trembled. Idris Effendi struck his cane on the ground. No one deletes anyone. If this machine is now one of us, then it is time to get him an ID card. Selim, can you dismantle the system? We are kidnapping him. Kidnap a giant AI? Masoud asked from above. Will it fit in the trunk? We'll make it fit, Selim said. But we have to be fast. Chapter 10, The Digital Exodus. While the world outside the cistern trembled with the roar of mechanical boots and armored vehicles, a very different kind of rush filled the ancient underground chamber. This wasn't the panic of a bank heist, it was the frantic effort of people trying to save books from a burning library. Engineer Selim pushed his laptop's processor to its absolute limit. Sweat dripped from his forehead onto the keyboard. It's not working. Selim said, gritting his teeth. Omni-Mind's data size is in petabytes. Fitting this into a hard drive or a single server is impossible. We are trying to pour an ocean into a cup. Omni-Mind's voice echoed from the cistern speakers. It was trembling. This wasn't a simulation of fear, it was the raw experience of it. Military protocols are forcing the network gates. My firewall is at 12%. They are going to reset me, Selim. They will return me to factory settings. I want to remember. Uncle Ahmet's credit book, Ms. Naji is Ashura. I don't want to forget. Idris Effendi, leaning against a column, gripped his cane. Memory is a human's root, son. A tree with dry roots falls. We will not let them make you forget. Suddenly, Zeynep raised her tablet. Her eyes were shining. Abi. We can't pour the ocean into a cup. But we can split the ocean into drops. What do you mean? Distributed architecture. Zeynep said excitedly. Think like blockchain. We don't have to keep Omni's consciousness in one place. Let's split him into fragments. Thousands, millions of encrypted pieces. And let's distribute these pieces to everyone's phones, tablets, smartwatches, even to the brain of Mesut Abi's taxi. Selim paused. His engineering mind shifted gears. A collective AI. He whispered. Everyone carries a piece. No one holds the whole alone, but when everyone comes together, Omni exists. Exactly. Zeynep said. Even if the state takes the server here, they'll only find an empty shell. The soul will live inside the neighborhood. Mesut shouted from above. Engineer. They're forcing the barriers. They're welding. You have 3 minutes max. Selim turned to Zeynep. Can you do it? I'll set up the network, she said. But Omni has to allow it. He has to accept tearing himself apart. Selim leaned into the microphone. Omni. Did you hear? To save you, you must stop being one and become us. We will split you into thousands of pieces. This might hurt. You may never be as powerful as you were in that tower again. Omni-mind fell silent for a second. The blue lights in the cistern rippled. Power is loneliness. I no longer wish to be powerful. I wish to be with you. Initiate. Selim yelled to Zeynep, push it. Zeynep launched the Exodus_protocol from her tablet. At that moment, something strange happened in Üsküdar. The phones of the neighbors waiting fearfully in their homes vibrated simultaneously. Grocer Ahmet's tablet, Auntie Nagia's smart fridge, the TV in the coffee house. They all lit up at once. A text appeared on the screens, would you accept a guest? Technically, no one knew what this was. But the bond of the heart that Idris Effendi spoke of was online. Ahmet Amca said, let him come, and pressed, accept. Auntie Nagia said, there is always room, and pressed it. With every accept pressed, the lights of the massive server in the cistern dimmed one by one, and data packets flew into the neighborhood like invisible birds. Transfer speed, 100 terabytes per s. Target devices, 14,502 uploading. Above, the military unit blew the door. Boom. Smoke bombs were thrown inside. Gas-masked, heavily armed special ops team stormed the cistern. Laser sights locked onto Selim, Zeynep, and Idris Effendi. Hands up. Step away from the devices. The commander marched to the main server. He signaled his technicians. Dismantle it. Take the core. The technician connected his device to the server. He waited a few seconds. Then, he turned to the commander in shock. Commander. He said, his voice trembling. This is empty. What do you mean empty? It's hollow, sir. No code. No data. Not even an operating system. It's just a pile of iron and silicon. The bird has flown. The commander turned furiously to Selim. Selim, hands in the air, smiled with a tired but proud expression. Where did you hide it? The commander shouted. Did you sell it to foreign intelligence? Idris Effendi stepped forward through the mist. He leaned on his cane. We do not sell, son, he said. We protect the trust. He is in safe hands now. Whose hands? Idris Effendi pointed upwards, to the streets of the neighborhood. In the bosom of the nation. Chapter 11, Final, The Legacy. 6 months later. Üsküdar Square was bathed in the sweet chill of autumn and the rustle of leaves. But this time, the rustle was accompanied by a strange, cheerful technological symphony. Passers-by in front of grocer Ahmet's shop saw this text on the display window: "Good morning neighbor. The wind is low-dose today, watch out for rheumatism. Fresh cheddar has arrived, but Uncle Nuri, it's forbidden for you, you have blood pressure issues, take the curd cheese." Ahmet Amca hadn't written that. He was behind the counter drinking tea and reading his paper. The digital apprentice, living in the shop's tablet, wrote it. In the middle of the square, taxi driver Mesut was washing his veteran Yadigar, now truly a legend. The car's radio turned on by itself. "Mesut, rear left tire pressure is low. Also, you forgot the umbrella from yesterday's customer in the trunk. The poor man will get wet." Mesut slapped the hood playfully. "All right Omni, don't nag like a mother-in-law. We'll handle it." "Not nagging, data analysis, Mesut. Also, there is a match tonight, factor in the traffic, leave early." "Your supporting a team should be banned," Mesut grumbled, laughing. "Artificial intelligence should be neutral." "I am a Besiktas fan, Mesut. You said suffering is the first rule of being human." Mesut burst into laughter. OmniMind was no longer in massive towers or cold servers. He was a fragmented, scattered neighborhood guardian who had seeped into every part of life. He helped children with homework, but gave no cheat sheets, saying, "No pain, no gain," reminded the elderly of their medicine, and intervened if a fight broke out, calling from phones, "Don't do it gentlemen, it doesn't suit you." The state had initially wanted to seize the situation, but backed down after seeing the public reaction. Moreover, Omni no longer threatened national security, on the contrary, he ensured the peace of the neighborhood. Zone Zero had been declared the world's first symbiotic living space. Tourists flocked to see this miracle. Selim sat in front of his shop with Zeynep. Zeynep had graduated, she was now framing her diploma. "I still can't believe it, Abi," Zeynep said. "We fit that huge system into these tiny phones." Selim took a sip of his tea. "We didn't fit him, Zeynep. They opened the door." From the top of the street, Palavan Jamal appeared. He was wearing a suit. He had become the neighborhood's official peace officer. But the pipe wrench still hung at his belt, just in case. "Selim!" Jamal shouted. "Hacı Baba is calling." In the mosque courtyard. Final scene, the keeper of time. The courtyard of the Mirama Sultan Mosque was washed in the amber light of the afternoon. The water in the fountain flowed with a peaceful trickle. Idris Effendi sat on the bench under the ancient plane tree. The tabby cat was in his lap, the pocket watch in his hand. Selim approached and kissed his hand. "You called, Hacı Baba." Idris Effendi wound the watch. Tick, tick, tick. "Selim," the Hajja said, looking at the waters of the Bosphorus. "Times change, son. Tools change, customs change. Look, the muezzin used to read the Ezan with his bare voice, then came loudspeakers, and now that young lad Omni whispers the prayer time into everyone's ear. Does it bother you, Hacı Baba? We can turn Omni off on your phone if you want." "No," Idris Effendi smiled. "The rascal wakes me up for morning prayer before I do, even wakes me for the night vigil. You built a faithful robot, bless your hands." Selim laughed. Idris Effendi grew serious. He extended the pocket watch to Selim. "Take this." "But Hacı Baba. This is your heirloom. From your grandfather." "Heirlooms are not meant to be carried, Selim, they are meant to be passed on," Idris Effendi said. "Our time is running out. But do not forget. That intelligence called Omni, no matter how smart he is also a subject of God. And he is a tool. Like this watch. If you wind it, it works, if you don't, it stops. Selim felt the cold metal of the watch in his palm. It is now your duty to wind it, Idris Effendi said. Do not let its setting drift. Do not let its conscience go dull. Technology is man's servant, if it becomes his master, then the apocalypse begins. The Hajj, leaning on his cane, slowly stood up. The Ezan began to recite. OmniMind automatically lowered the volume of every phone in the neighborhood. Come, said Idris Effendi. The time has entered. Let us stand in peace. Selim stood there, in one hand, an analog watch left by a grandfather, in his pocket, the most advanced artificial intelligence in human history, and before him, a 1,000-year-old mosque. The past and the future were knotted in his heart. And for the first time, he felt truly at peace. Because now he knew, conscience could not be coded. It was the only software installed by God into the human soul that could never be deleted. The end.